18 commercial vessels have been struck or targeted by Iran in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz since this war began. Not 18 military vessels, not 18 warships carrying weapons and sailors trained for combat. 18 commercial ships, tankers, bulk carriers, and container vessels. These are the ships that carry oil to refineries, grain to ports, and manufactured goods to markets. They transport thousands of different types of cargo that move between Asia, Europe, and the Americas through the waterway that Iran has now turned into a dangerous zone. 18 ships in just a few days. Let me explain what that number means to the people who run the global economy. They received this information this morning, and they are not reacting calmly. The shipping industry works on a principle called freedom of navigation. It is not only a legal rule, it is the physical foundation of globalization. The entire system of modern trade depends on it. Just-in-time supply chains, container shipping, global energy markets, and the food supply for countries that cannot produce enough of their own food all rely on the assumption that commercial vessels can move through international waters without being attacked by the military forces of a sovereign state. Iran has struck 18 of them. That assumption is now broken. The Lloyd's of London War Risk Market, which provides the insurance system used by the shipping industry to measure and price the danger of operating in conflict zones, moved this morning to levels not seen since the tanker war of the 1980s. That was the last time Iran systematically targeted commercial shipping in the Persian Gulf as a tool of economic warfare. War risk insurance for vessels traveling through the Gulf is now quoted, where it is quoted at all, at prices that make most commercial voyages economically unreasonable. The insurance premium for a single transit through the Strait of Hormuz for a fully loaded VLCC, a very large crude carrier that transports Gulf oil to Asian refineries, now exceeds the daily operating cost of the ship by a margin that no commercial operator can routinely absorb. So the ships are stopping, not because navies ordered them to stop, not because a government officially closed the route. They are stopping because the people who own, operate, and crew these vessels saw that 18 ships were struck in just a few days. They made the same calculation any rational person would make when the road ahead is filled with the wreckage of the last 18 vehicles that tried to drive through it. They are simply not going. Now understand what stops moving when the ships stop. Normally, about 21 million barrels of oil per day pass through the Strait of Hormuz. That flow is already reduced by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps closure declaration, and by mines placed in the shipping lanes. Now add Iran's attacks on commercial shipping on top of that military closure. The result is simple mathematics. The amount of Gulf oil reaching global markets is approaching zero. Not the 20% disruption analysts predicted in the early days of the conflict. Not even the 30 or 40% that the closure announcement suggested. A number close to zero, because the vessels that might theoretically carry oil through partially cleared routes are not willing to risk becoming the 19th ship on Iran's list. And it is not only oil. The Persian Gulf and the surrounding waters are not just an oil highway. They are also a major route for global container shipping between Asian manufacturing centers and consumer markets in Europe and the Americas. Ships carrying electronics assembled in South Korea, clothing manufactured in Bangladesh, automotive components produced in India, and thousands of other goods normally travel westward through the Indian Ocean toward the Suez Canal. Many of those vessels pass through or near the area where Iran is now striking ships. 18 attacks completely changed the routing calculations for every shipping company. Alternative routes do exist. Ships can travel around the Cape of Good Hope at the southern tip of Africa. Cargo can move through overland rail corridors. Some shipping might even use the Northern Sea Route, which is open for longer periods each year than it was a decade ago. But these alternatives are slower by weeks, far more expensive, and they do not have the port infrastructure or logistics capacity to handle the enormous amount of cargo that normally passes through the Gulf, Hormuz, and the Red Sea at the same time. Global supply chains are not systems that easily reroute when sudden disruptions occur. They have been optimized over decades for specific routes, transit times, and port capacities. When those routes are suddenly disrupted, and not just for a week, but for an unknown period during an ongoing war, with 18 burning ships as the new reality, the system does not smoothly adjust. It backs up, it slows, sometimes it stops completely. Goods that were supposed to arrive do not arrive. Components that factories are waiting for never come. Production lines slow down. Finished products that should be shipped are delayed. Store shelves start to empty. This is how a war in the Persian Gulf turns into inflation in Stuttgart, empty store shelves in Seoul, and supply chain problems in Chicago. It does not happen through some abstract financial mechanism. It happens because the ships carrying the goods are not moving, because 18 of the ones that tried were struck. Now look closely at the ships Iran has chosen to target. The pattern tells us something important about Iranian strategy. Iran is not targeting only American-flagged ships or vessels connected to the United States. The 18 ships that were struck represent many different flags, nationalities, and ownership structures. Some are tankers linked to Japan, others are bulk carriers operated by companies from Greece, some container vessels are connected to United Kingdom. The crews come from countries such as the Philippines, India, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan. These are countries that have no military role in this conflict. Their governments did not authorize any attacks on Iran. Yet their sailors woke up this morning on commercial ships in the Persian Gulf and suddenly became casualties in a war that had nothing to do with them. That wide range of targets is intentional. Iran is not trying to damage American commerce alone. Iran is trying to damage global commerce. Its goal is to make the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz economically impossible for ships of every flag. The objective is clear: create international pressure on the United States to end the conflict. Every Japanese tanker that is struck becomes a phone call from Tokyo to Washington. Every Greek carrier that is hit becomes a message from Athens to Brussels. Every vessel with Filipino crew members that takes damage creates pressure from the government in Manila asking why its citizens are dying in someone else's war. Iran is spreading the cost of American military operations across the entire world. The 18 strikes are the mechanism, and the mechanism is working. The international order that emerged after World War II was not built only through UN resolutions, diplomatic treaties, and international institutions like the United Nations. It was also built through shipping lanes. It depended on the ability of commercial ships to move through international waters without being attacked by the military forces of sovereign states. The entire global economy was built on the assumption that its physical infrastructure, the ships, the sea lanes, and the ports, would be protected because every nation depends on them. 18 attacks in a few days is Iran's message about that system. The message is simple. It does not apply here. Not now. Not while American and Israeli aircraft are striking Iranian territory. Not while 67 American service members are dead in Kuwait and the Strait of Hormuz is mined. In effect, Iran is declaring that the international maritime order is suspended in this waterway until the political conditions that cause this conflict are resolved on terms that Iran can accept. That is an extraordinary position for any country to take. If it continues, it does more than disrupt the global economy. It sends a message to every nation with the ability to strike ships at sea. The international maritime system can be suspended if a determined state is willing to accept the cost of doing so. Countries such as Russia, China, and North Korea are watching carefully. Every state that has ever challenged the American-led system that keeps global sea lanes open is observing Iran strike commercial ships and challenge the rules that have governed the oceans for decades. Vessels around the world are watching both Iran and the global response. The world has responded with condemnation, warnings, statements from maritime organizations, and diplomatic protests. But none of this has stopped the 18th ship from being struck, and none of it will stop the 19th. Now consider what happens when the 19th, 20th, and 21st ships are hit. Oil prices, already above $130, will climb even higher. Every ship that stops moving is a ship not delivering oil to a refinery that needs it. Every refinery that does not get its crude produces less petroleum product, less gasoline, less diesel, less aviation fuel, less of everything an economy relies on that runs on refined petroleum. Most economies are not yet equipped to run on anything else. The market's response to shrinking supply, while demand stays the same, is simple and harsh. Prices rise. They keep rising until either supply returns or demand falls because the economy contracts to the point where people cannot afford the fuel. Goldman Sachs has stopped giving ceiling numbers. Analysts who modeled $150 as the base case for a 2-week Hormuz closure now face a different scenario. An indefinite commercial shipping strike on top of a military closure, plus the Ras Laffan shutdown, Ras Tanura damage, and strikes in Bahrain, Kuwait, and Iraq. The layers of disruption are stacking faster than any model was designed to handle. The 18 ships burning in the Persian Gulf are not just a military story. They are an economic story, a supply chain story, a food security story for nations importing grain through these lanes, and an energy story for Asian economies that rely on Gulf oil. They are a political story too. Governments are getting calls from shipping companies asking for naval escorts, from energy ministries asking what happens to refineries if tankers stop, and from finance ministries modeling how $160 oil affects inflation, growth, and political schedules. The American military can fight Iran, and it is doing so. B-52s are arriving, THAAD batteries are going online, command infrastructure at Jafar is being restored, and U.S. air power is being applied against IRGC military targets. But the U.S. military cannot simultaneously escort every commercial vessel that must pass through the Persian Gulf and Strait of Hormuz. They cannot clear mines quickly enough to restore full commercial transit, while also managing an active air campaign and base defenses across Kuwait, Iraq, Bahrain, and Qatar, all while replenishing interceptor stocks. Each of the 18 ships is a data point in the market, a conversation between a shipping company and its insurer, a decision by a vessel operator not to be the 19th. Each ship represents barrels of oil not reaching refineries, containers of goods not reaching ports, and crew members who now add to the human cost of this conflict, joining the 67 American service members killed in Kuwait. The ocean is effectively closed, not by decree, not by formal blockade, but by 18 strikes against commercial vessels in a waterway that the world built its economy around. And the 19th ship has not yet attempted to cross.